Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
Hi, Aashish. Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's good to reconnect.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So, Alex, you have been a serial entrepreneur, having founded 3 startups, all in data space. For the benefit of our students and those who are listening, could you please share some details about your background?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yes, as you said, Aashish, I focused on data. I kind of realized early on that data is more permanent, right? We keep changing applications and we keep migrating data from one to another. So that kind of got me hooked, and I've been focusing on it ever since, working on everything from database kernels to replication to starting my first company called Acta in ETL space, which is now part of SAP Data Services. It was purchased by Business Objects. Business Objects got purchased by SAP, and now it's their core ETL tool. After Acta, I did consulting. So before Acta as well, I basically do consulting for a year or two to see what the patterns are. I call it hands-on market research. Well, one of the things I absolutely hate doing is building things nobody needs. So I'm very focused on making sure that whatever I build is going to be, there'll be a market pool and there'll be real people using it. So I spent a couple of years after Acta Consulting, I realized the big problem wasn't creating more data. The big problem was we have too much data, right? What does it mean? People can't keep track of it. So I started a company called Xeris to try to automatically infer meaning from data. What we did is we would look at 2 data sets and map one to another. And we would build SQL or ETL code, we would build lookup tables. So we would actually do data discovery and turn it into actionable code that you can use. And then from there, we move to data quality, data governance, and a number of other areas, because once you know what data should be, now you can see all the data that doesn't conform to what it should be. So we sold Xeris to IBM. I spent a couple of years at IBM, and then got recruited by a company called Informatica, all in data space, all working on, data problems, everything from metadata to ETL to data understanding and governance. At Informatica, I ran core technology, which was about 400 developers doing the core ETL product, metadata, and so on, and then became a general manager of data quality business unit, focusing on data quality and governance. And then after Informatica, I joined Menlo Ventures as AIR and spent my obligatory year doing market research, and basically spent a year talking to people. Instead of doing consulting, I decided I had a big enough network, and Menlo had people they could introduce me to, and so on. So I spent my time going to conferences, talking to people, and asking them about their projects. Like, okay, tell me about your last data project. And mostly, people are really into data science. People were doing a lot of analytics. The data became the big deal, right? There was a lot of big data projects. And the stories are very similar. The stories were all about how they spent time finding the data. Like once they found it, it was great, until they realized it's wrong data, or it's bad data, or they're missing an attribute. Then they had to go through the hell of finding it again. And I asked them, well, how do you find it? And the answer was always, oh, you ask around. But if you ask the wrong person, you get the wrong answer, you get the wrong data, and you get very bad results. And you don't know until you are done with your project that your data was wrong. Then I talked to big data companies like Google and LinkedIn, and they all had catalogs, right? What they did is they built a catalog, and people would populate. There'll be an owner for each data asset, and they would be able to ask them questions, and eventually owners would get tired of answering questions and document everything in a catalog. So I put 2 and 2 together, my previous background trying to automate data understanding, and the need for a catalog, and started Waterline Data, which was originally actually called Sherlock Data, but we renamed it later, to automate the process of creating catalogs for other companies who couldn't afford tons of developers and custom development. So Waterline, just to finish the story, I guess, the Waterline data, we sold it to Hitachi Vantara last year. And after that, I decided I want to see what the big data companies are up to. And I joined Facebook to work on privacy because I felt like privacy is going to be the next big problem that needs to be solved. And Facebook is doing really good and interesting work in this area.
Right, right. So I know that you launched Waterline data back in 2013.
Yes.
And thank you very much for the background. One of the things that really jumped out to me was the year you spent. You decided to spend a year as an EIR with Menlo Ventures. The primary objective of that was to do market research. Could you add more to that? Why you believe market research is so important? I remember in our previous discussions, you mentioned that you spoke to at least 100 people in doing your research.
Yes.
So would love to know more about that process.
Absolutely. So there are a couple of reasons for it. There's a lot of tendency. I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs and they just want to build stuff. They always talk about, yeah, worst case we'll pivot, but we got to build something. And I always ask them the same question. Okay, so let's say you built it. What would you do next? Oh, then we would buy Google keywords. Oh, then we would go talk to people. So I thought, why don't you talk to people first? Why don't you buy Google keywords first? Well, but we don't have a product. That's fine. Just have a page where it says, we are working on this. We're in stealth mode. If you're interested, please sign up for our mailing list and we'll keep you updated. And see how many people care, right? Why spend the year building things and then find out nobody cares, right? So it's really important to know who cares and why they care so you can build the right products. So I think there is a lot of cart before the horse going on. So I really believe you need to be able to answer questions like, okay, who'll be using your product? Let's say you build it. Like, is there a person who will actually be using it? If there isn't a person, like, who are you gonna sell to? Who's gonna pay for this? Maybe there is a person, they have no budget. Okay, wonderful. And I'm mostly talking about the enterprise, right? For consumer world, very different, right? There it's possible to start something, go viral. Nobody can really predict why things go viral, right? Like there are companies that do similar things. One just takes off, that one doesn't. And I've talked to a few entrepreneurs and they all say, and VCs in fact, all say kind of the same thing. Like we can't really tell. So either you had a hit, then we might fund you. If you don't have a hit, just you have to start, get to 100,000 users, then we'd rather pay premium once we know it's a hit than get a bargain and have no idea where it's going to go. But for enterprise software, your market is actually quite well defined. Like if there is no people you can go after, if there are no places where they congregate, you're going to have a hard time marketing. Like if you can't sell people on a vision, then you aren't going to be able to sell them on a product that easily either.
One of the things you had shared with me in the past was that when you do your market research and you're meeting with these hundreds of people, you don't really ask them the question, what is the business problem you think it is? It's really what project are you working on?
So it's this thing where you really have to ask people what they do, not what they need. And it's up to you as an entrepreneur, as a product manager, to figure out what that means, right? Like, because they might not understand what they need. They might not see the trend because they know their problem. You're looking across many people. So if you ask them, okay, tell me about your project, right? What did you do the first week? Why was that difficult? Like, who helped you? Why did they help? You really need to get a sense of the environment where you're going to be selling and the problem you'll be solving. So you need like 360 degree of the problem. And then you really have to focus on, okay, well, if it's such a big problem, why hasn't it been solved? Right? That's very important. You have to figure out, and this kind of touches on what VCs also look for is the why now, right? Like, okay, if this was such a big problem, if not knowing data is such a big problem, everybody spends so much time, how come you can solve it now and you couldn't solve it before? My second company, I spent 2 years without funding because VCs told me, look, it can't be solved. everybody had the story of a company they founded to solve this problem because obviously everybody knew it's a problem. And it just can't be solved. They had the worst story, they wouldn't fund it. So I actually had to build a prototype. It took me 2 years because I wasn't funded and a couple of people who were helping me could afford to not work, right? And then we had the pilot and we had 6 VCs competing for 2 slots because obviously everybody knew it was a problem. There, the risk was technology risk. So you really have to figure out where is the problem, who is going to pay for it, who is going to use it, and why has it not been done? Because as much as we all like to think we're the smartest people on the planet, and the reason they haven't done it before is because they're not as smart as we are, the reality is there are a lot of very smart people. And if it's such a big problem and such a big opportunity, it's very unlikely nobody tried to solve it. So the best answers you're looking for, yeah, we tried to do it 3 times and every time we couldn't figure out how to do it. Okay, because now it's a technology risk. They're willing to pay. It's bad enough they're willing to solve it. If the answer is, I don't know why we haven't tried to solve it, then either there's nobody who cares enough, nobody to pay for it, or it's not as big a problem as they tell you, because that's the other question I guess you should be always asking is, what are your top problems? And you're not looking to solve their problems. You're just trying to see if the one you're focusing on isn't the top list. Because if it's a big problem, but it's number 10, it just won't get funded. It won't get the attention. So in that sense, you're not asking them to tell you what to build, but you're trying to gauge where the money is going. And if your problem addresses the top 3 or 4, that's wonderful. Because top 3 or 4 projects might be related. Oh yeah, we're doing GDPR. Okay, well, data understanding is a big part of GDPR. Cool. Okay, we're not solving GDPR problem, but we are gonna tap into that budget. Same thing, data science. Okay, well, data science needs good data. Maybe if you have a data quality problem, that taps into that. So you're trying to identify top of mind things, because otherwise you do what's called missionary work. You're gonna have to go convince them they have a problem, and then convince them that you have a solution, and that's very hard. Like very few startups are able to overcome that. Ideally, what you want to do is they already know they have a problem. They just don't realize it could be solved. That's a much easier sell.
So what was your product vision with Waterline data? Because as you were meeting with all these different network connections that you had, you met with large companies, how they were solving the problems, and you saw that they were doing cataloging, and you saw the business opportunity. You thought that, look, Googles of the world are doing it this way, but what about mainstream enterprises? There's a product I can build and take it to the market that could be useful for those mainstream enterprises for data cataloging. What was your vision towards building this product?
So originally, the problem, so you have to, just like you have to tie your vision to the top of mind initiatives, for VCs, you have to tie your vision to big mega trends, right? So we focused on data science problem, right? And the problem with data science is you really need somebody who knows the data. You need somebody who knows the business, and you need a data scientist who knows data science. So like you really need 3 people to be able to solve any problem. And what we claimed is, look, we can automate by understanding data, we can actually automate knowing data and finding the right data. So and the first step for it was the catalog. So that's how we positioned this, that eventually data science will be as common as spreadsheets and back then BI. These days it is. So I think we were right on with the market direction. And we said the big problem, the big gap is going to be not knowing where the data is. Because, if you think about data science, it's all about feature engineering. The models, there was a lot of studies that were coming out back then and still are, that like using a better model might give you few percent more, F2 accuracy, but having an extra feature might give you 10, 15% if that's the main feature. Like if you're trying to predict the price of the house, you don't have school information, it's going to be very difficult for you to tell why this identical house costs 20% more than this house because you're just missing data. So it was all down to, okay, can you find the right data? What do we know about this? What's available for us? So we tapped into that trend. And then the other trend we tapped into was data lakes. So to solve that problem, people are saying, okay, let's get data in one place. And typically what they were doing is they were dumping petabytes of data into a file system and going, here, data scientists, go use it. Data scientists are going, how? Like, okay, I have 1 billion files that all look weird. How do I know which ones are the ones I can use? So that was, our focus was on building catalogs for data lakes, primarily for data scientists and other data lake projects.
Could you give us more insights into the initial setup of Waterline data, which includes a lot because you have to have the advisors. You were EIR at Menlo Ventures, so
right.
You probably had some thoughts about funding, seed funding, maybe Series A after some time. So could you share some of those thoughts about how was your thinking in terms of funding, in terms of building the team initially, including the advisors, etc.?
Yeah, so again, the way I think about this is, the funding has to get you to the next proof point so you can raise more funding, right? Because you're not building a profitable company on seed rounds. So I didn't actually do seed round because you really need seed round to, if you just can't afford to do anything, it's hard to raise it anyway, but you really need to build a prototype if there is technology risk. And the investors, the investor at Menlo worked with me before, so it wasn't really a concern for them. The real concern was market validation. I really didn't need money for that. I could just not pay myself, right, for a year and do the market research. So you really need to think about why you're raising money and how it will get you to the next point. Because the worst thing you can do is raise money without understanding how you're going to use it and get to when money runs out and you don't have anything to prove, right? You have to get to a fundable event. For example, you removed all the risk or you got the first set of customers. So typically, like the way I think about the seed round is really to remove all the risk and get to the point where you are really building a production product. A round is to build a production product, which is what we raised. B round is to go to market and prove that it actually works and it adds value to people. So you get your first handful of customers. And really, I'm talking about enterprise software. The consumer software is very different. And then the next round, C round and beyond, is really to scale out, right? To get the productivity for your sales force, get all the go-to-market kinks ironed out. So with Waterline, we just went for the A round because I felt, it has to be big enough to get us to build the product and get the first few customers so we can get the B round. If I could raise that enough money for that, I just wasn't going to do it because that's the other thing you have to keep in mind is, for VCs, it's a financial transaction, right? It's somebody else's money they invest, their own money in some cases. For you, it's an opportunity cost. You're investing your life in it. So if you're not convinced that this is going to be successful, know exactly how you're going to raise the next round, just don't waste their money, don't waste your time. You really have to convince yourself. And, you should feel responsible to both, investors, customers, and employees, right? Like people you bring on, relying on you for livelihood, right? Customers often bet your career on a startup, right? It's not just let's try it, right? For them, it's like they have a project, they might get fired if the project is not successful. So, and investors, of course, they're gonna lose money. So you should take this seriously. There is a lot of money right now and people tend to just, oh yeah, I'll get it and I'll pivot and I'll figure it out. And there are examples of companies that started in one place, ended up in another place, but you don't hear about thousands of companies that started in one place and never ended up anywhere, right? You only hear about the successes, so it seems like it's possible. But there's so much risk to a startup, like you should be really paranoid about validating everything and making sure the risk is taken out.
Thank you. That was something I was curious to get into the details of, because when you are starting, when you have a vision for the product, you know where you want to go, you have done the market research, you have done the market risk validation, etc. And you think you can pay for yourself for the next 12 months or so, then you can definitely avoid seed funding. But what about building the team? You need a team of 3 to 5 people. It's really ideal if you have like-minded people who can also come on board without the requirement of getting paid.
Right. And they don't have to quit their jobs. They just need to be committed enough to say, yeah, once this is funded, we're going to join. The other thing I did actually that reminded me is I did file patents. I did file a patent for the technology, again, to take care of the technology risk. So I had a legal firm, a lot of legal firms will work with you as entrepreneur for free, with the idea that they'll file it and then they'll get paid once you are funded. So that's one of the things you guys should consider. If, again, it's all about defensible. You either can defend on technology, you can defend on the market. If you defend on technology, you better have a patent or something unique, right, that you can do, show to investors. Because investors are not technical. It's not like they're going to get into the weeds. They might hire some people to come and look at your technology, and they might be very technical, but they themselves are not going to figure it out. Or if it's on market, then you better have a kick-ass go-to-market strategy so nobody can catch up with you, and talk about why all the existing players in the space, once they figure out what you're doing, can't catch up. I mean, that's one of the questions people are always asking. How much can I tell my investors? This idea is so hot, like if it gets out. Said, look, it's going to get out. Once you have a website, it's going to get, once you start recruiting people, it's going to get out. If you can't tell your investors what you are building, for the fear somebody will bypass you, people will bypass you. You don't have a defensible business. So you better think of how to make it defensible, either by inventing cool technology or by having alliances. You need something that will help you win, because otherwise, or you have to have credibility as a kick-ass go-to-market person with track record.
Thank you. So could you share with us the technology stack of this product that you built at Waterline Data? Because, and please give us the whole ecosystem, explaining to us how the whole magic works, as well as what are the different components required in ingestion, computing, etc.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we initially focused on Hadoop and big data environments. So we started with Java and MapReduce. We fairly quickly moved to Spark once Spark was mature. When we started, Spark wasn't even stable. So Hadoop wasn't that stable either. So we spent a lot of time struggling with the environment. Actually, that was our biggest challenge. Was our customers all had different configurations and they didn't quite work. And we spent a lot of time getting their Hadoop clusters to work rather than our technology. But yeah, we used Spark and Java, and we developed our own custom machine learning algorithms to enable the training. So what the product did is it would crawl the cluster, right? Read every file, parse it, infer the schema, then infer what each field might mean. It would profile the field and create what we call the fingerprint. And then we would, based on labeling, like if you label a field religion, let's say, based on that label and a fingerprint of that field, we would compare it to all the other fingerprints of other fields and suggest which other fields could be religion, and put all this in a catalog. So now if you search for religion, you can find all the fields regardless of what they were named in all the files, in all the tables, in Hive tables, Oracle tables, JSON files, and so on. Regardless of what the field was named, you'll be able to find those fields. So if you're a data scientist looking for, okay, I need demographic data and I need this, I need school information, you'll be able to search using standard terms and find the data you need.
What was the language of choice that you had in developing a lot of this proprietary and unique algorithms?
Yeah, we used Java for everything because we knew we weren't going to just stay on Hadoop, and Kubernetes wasn't there yet. We ended up supporting the three major cloud platforms, AWS, Azure, and GCP. And right now, I think we're all Kubernetized, and the product can run anywhere. But back then, it was, porting was a big deal, so we used Java, and it was mature enough and fast enough. We did some testing; it was perfectly wonderful for backend enterprise software.
Thank you. Could you tell us what are the real world use cases for the data cataloging product in large enterprises, which is where we were targeting from the
Yes.
customer base standpoint? So what would be the really real world applications and use cases of it?
Yeah, so the two main use cases were, on one hand, data self-service, right? For data scientists, data analysts to be able to find data sets that they need. And then on the flip side was data governance, including privacy, where, to apply privacy rules or governance rules in general, you need to have a consistent view of the data. So by having these consistent labels, you can now write policies or rules that say things like, oh, give me, for GDPR, show me all the data sets that contain personal information, that contain religion, age, name, phone number, and so on. So those were the two main use cases, and they actually tie together very much, because if you let people do self-service, the first thing you have to do is prove that there is no sensitive data that's leaking. You don't want them to take a data set and go, oh, I have everybody's social security numbers. Isn't that nice, right? So, and, sorry, it was funny. One data scientist I talked to when I was doing my research said, yeah, I'm leaving my job. I said, why? Well, they built this data lake and then they encrypted everything. And I have to prove to them data is not sensitive before they decrypt it. And he said, I can't even read the data. How can I possibly prove to them what's in there? So it's kind of, I can't do anything. I'm leaving. This is ridiculous. And on the flip side, right, you talk to chief data officers and they all say, well, we can't just let people run wild in this data lake because we loaded everything in there. So until we know what's in there, we can't let them use it. So it was a catch-22 that we were very nicely solving. And then the other interesting development was when we talked to chief data officers, which when we started, there really weren't any. And as we were going, they became a thing and became very prominent. They all said kind of the same thing. Yeah, we fund it for governance, but we really want to use it for self-service. That was the big deal. So it goes back to the question of how you get funded. And they all felt like funding is defense and self-service is offense, because self-service lets the businesses do really big things and change the top line and bottom line of their business, where governance is just protecting them from violating any regulations.
Absolutely. It's so much easier to convince the board or the CFO for the funding required to do a program when you know it's a requirement from a governance standpoint.
Right. It's just, look, you don't want to be on the front page of New York Times. Everybody goes, no, I don't. Here's the check, right? If you tell them, look, we can do this, and 3 years later, data scientists might invent something, that's a problem. On the other hand, if you do it and you focus on really productive data science use case, you can show very early wins, then you become a hero. Because the problem with governance people, they're always like, you guys are just a cost center and a pain in the butt, right? and they all want to be heroes. They all want to be the people who democratized the data and made it available for the business to do cool things.
What were the major or in different industries you had in your customer? You had hardware manufacturers, government. Could you list a few? Yeah,
so it was purely horizontal. We had hardware manufacturers, we had pharmaceuticals, we had government, we had space exploration. I wonder who could that be, so we had all kinds of large customers. The only trend was insurance companies, energy companies. So the only common thing was they were all large enterprises with a lot of data. And they built glossaries, and then they used us to tag data and inventory it, and then have a catalog where people can search for the data they need or write rules. We had a rules engine on top of the catalog where you could write rules to actually apply policies or enforce policies.
Thank you. So in January 20, Alex, Hitachi Vantara decided, and you guys decided to go forward with the acquisition. What
Right.
was your thinking, and how did you know it was the right time and the right place for you to exit? Could you share your thinking with us so that we can get an idea of different times of opportunities to look into the exit process?
Yeah, so generally, I think of it as, there are three reasons you want to sell, right? One is you don't think it's going to go anywhere. Then you might as well salvage what you can, right? Another one is you think you'll do better now than later, because companies go through multiple phases, right? So like Series A is really to build the product to production. Series B is to validate the market. Series C is to start scaling out. Like if a big company is buying you, and Series B you have, I don't know, 20 customers, and Series C you have 50 customers, really doesn't matter to them. It's noise, right? They have 10,000 customers. So you're not gonna get any premium for having 50 customers over 20 customers. Whether you're making 10 million or 12 million, it really doesn't move the needle for them. So then if you think you're gonna exit, you're gonna grow and become public, it might make sense to exit because you maximize the value for investors. So there's a lot of market headwinds is another thing. Like if you see competition, like we had the very first catalog in the market. By the time we exit, there was 55 catalogs, I think. Everybody had a catalog. So everybody woke up and said, yeah, of course we need a catalog. How can you use big data or data in general? How can you do any governance? How can you do any privacy? Like privacy regulations were a huge push for it because everybody said, it was CDOs told me this. Yeah, I'm sitting in the CEO's staff meeting. He goes, what do you mean we don't know where all the customer data is? How is that possible? And it's like, look, we don't even know what data we have. I told you this for years. And it says, well, fix it. Right? So everybody realized they need a catalog. Some built them, some repurposed them, but everybody was selling one. So market becomes very noisy. You have to decide, like, can you go alone against those giants, or do you need partners to help grow the business? So there's a lot of variables, but basically think of it as, should I raise money or should I exit? Is kind of natural. And of course, the third example is when people come to you and make you an offer you can't refuse. That's obviously a good place to be, and you have to again decide, like, is it worth the risk of trying to go it alone, or is it better to exit? Because for your customers, bigger company usually means better support and more stability, and it becomes much easier to sell your technology because they trust the big company more. They have a bigger sales force. It's like there's a lot of things from your customer perspective, from technology perspective, to warrant an acquisition. On the other hand, innovation might slow down. People might not want to. So there's a lot of factors you have to weigh. And then financial, of course, investors have a big say in whether they want to keep putting money in, or whether they think, it's a reasonable risk-reward ratio at this point.
And also, we were talking about how even the companies that are acquiring are looking at you as a startup and see, is it a technology play, or is it really a customer base that they can benefit from?
Right. It's either an acqui-hire where they're just getting the people, like they need, and I have some friends, they went through it. They were offered sort of ridiculous amounts for the place they were in. They didn't even have technology, but companies felt they need the people. Then you have a product acquisition where they need the technology, right? Everybody has a catalog. Hitachi doesn't have a catalog. Okay, well, that's a good match, right?
Thanks for sharing. You touched on something very important, a point of view from a VC standpoint coming from Menlo Ventures yourself as an EIR. Would you share your perspective as to what VCs are looking for when they are looking to invest into startups? Just a very high broad brushes as to what are the key topics or areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And some of it aligns with what I talked about entrepreneurs should look for, right? Because you have to be convinced yourself. But generally think of it as, how big is the problem? And it's really important for you to understand your venture capitalist that you are talking to, because venture capitalists are not all the same, right? Like if you have to invest $5 billion, investing 10 million and making 100 million on it is not meaningful, right? So for those funds, they are looking for investing 100 million, making $1 billion. Okay, so they're looking for big ideas, like big markets. Some of the funds that only 100 million, 200 million funds, they can't afford to invest 100 million in one company, right? So they're not looking for huge plays, they're looking for solid businesses. So they're gonna ask you questions about, well, but how soon can you make money? How soon can you build a real business? Is this a real business? Who will pay for this? And so on. Where the first type of VCs are just thinking, yeah, can you build a huge user base? Can you own a segment? Because you can figure out how to monetize later and they don't worry about pumping more money for you to monetize it. So you really have to understand who you are pitching to, and pitching to a VC with a small fund. Hey, there's huge opportunity. We have to build a customer base and then we'll figure out how to monetize, going to turn them off. On the other hand, pitching to a huge fund that's very looking for strategic plays. Hey, we can be profitable in 2 years, 3 years. They don't care, right? So again, you think about who you're pitching and think about how big is the problem, right? And there you really have to think about, like, who are the customers? Who will be using it? Like one of the litmus tests I use when I do market validation is, okay, you told me this is a real problem for you guys, but if I had this product today, who would be using it? And if people can't tell me who would be using it, that means it's going to be a very uphill battle. Yes, it's a problem, but nobody owns the problem, right? Then you're going to have to figure out whom to sell to every time custom. And that's a very hard value proposition because you can't market to everybody, right? If there is a well-defined role that will have this problem and buy this product, then it's perfect, right? You market to them, you sell to them, you train your salespeople to talk to them, much easier. The other question you have to ask is, why hasn't it been solved, right? I think of it as why now? Like if it's such a big problem and people are willing to pay for it and they convince you like, okay, Fred in accounting will use it, or whoever the right person is, why hasn't it been done? And the best answer you can get is, oh, we tried it, we invested $1 million, we just couldn't get it done, right? Because then you have some unique technology. Or, oh, it didn't work because we couldn't scale it. And now that you have big data, now that's the why now is, oh yeah, we have this technology called big data that can now scale it beyond what you were able to do before, which was in our case, absolutely true. Once you figured out why now and convinced yourself, and because investors, your next question is why us, right? Why is this team uniquely positioned to take advantage of it? And hopefully it's not because you just stumbled onto it, you have no idea, you've never done anything in this space. So again, play to your strength. If you don't have the right people, like let's say you figured out something in medical field, you're a technologist, you don't know anything in medical field, get a co-founder from medical field. Like think about your team has to sell, right, and be credible. Then finally, what kind of play is it? And this plays back to different VC funds. One is disruptive innovation. Okay, we're going to change the way people do blah, right? The way people find data. The other one is better, faster, cheaper. Yeah, they're doing it now, but with Java, we can write a database that's portable. Okay, that's a faster, better, cheaper play and has very different parameters. And it might still be a huge play because if everybody is using it, you're going to disrupt that market and take over. That's still a big play, but you just have to be aware of what you're doing. If you're innovating or if you're just undercutting existing competitors. And then, think about the risks. And we touched on it before, but really think through like, what's the technology risk? Like, is it doable? If it's not doable and such a big problem, have people try doing it? Like other companies, just like I went out and talked to LinkedIn and Google, all those companies to see what they're doing for this problem, right? I would get interest to people and ask them, and they would tell me it's a problem, and then either talk about how they tried to solve it but couldn't, or talk about how they're solving it. Then think about business risk. Go-to-market value models working for this. Like traditionally, right, in enterprise software, it's always hard to serve small and medium business, right? Because, with a large business, right, you get one customer, they pay you enough to justify a salesperson and the whole sales process. Yes, it's a painful process, but, if you sell something for $200,000-$300,000, it's worth getting a $300,000 person or $500,000 team to do those sales. When you have small businesses, how do you sell to them? How do they find you? Like a dentist is not going to go looking for a piece of technology. So think about go-to-market risks, and again, look for patterns. VCs are almost like, and investors in general, they're like Hollywood studios, right? The sequel of a successful movie is always less risk than trying to do something completely new. Same thing here. If you can find companies who solve this problem, either go-to-market problem or technology problem or something similar, not exactly this problem, otherwise they won't need you. But if you can show patterns of success, that works a long way for yourself, your team, as well as investors. People risk, right? Has the team work together? Okay, if you have 5 co-founders or 2 co-founders, they now work together. Like, how do you know they're going to get into trouble? It's a very intense experience, and unless people work well together and trust each other and have each other's back, it's very difficult to succeed and get through it. So again, just think about the risks and how you can mitigate them. If you can't take them out, because they're always risks, how you can mitigate them.
Thank you. One last question, Alex. The projects that the tech companies in Silicon Valley are working on, do you see a pattern that you'd like to share?
Well, I know privacy is a hot topic across all the companies, right? If your CEOs get called in front of Congress and in front of government bodies all the time to be grilled on privacy and how controls and so on, it's going to be a hot topic. So I see that there's a lot of focus on virtual reality, augmented reality, both at Facebook and outside. Again, driven a lot by this work from home and how can we make it less remote, for lack of a better term, less impersonal. The TikTok and the whole entertainment industry also, like how can you entertain people quickly and crowdsource entertainment? This used to be like, how do you find an audience was the biggest problem for artists, right? It was controlled by, like for artists, visual artists was controlled by gallery owners or museums. For performing arts was controlled by studios. And this explosion of direct to consumer relationships is, I think it's wonderful, but it's going to change a lot of things from monetization to just the best practices for acquiring audiences, keeping audience, so on. So there's a lot of social changes as well as technological, as well as business changes enabled by technology. Yeah, hopefully this is helpful. And, I mean, I do want to say, I find entrepreneurship a lot of fun, especially if you don't, like first startup was kind of stressful because I didn't know what to worry about. So I worried about everything. And, I felt responsible, right? I hired all these people, their livelihood depends on me, customers trust me, and so on. With the second and third one, it was easier because I knew what to worry about. So my advice would be get advisors who've done it, who can help you know what to worry about, look, stuff happens, you can't worry about everything, but this one might kill you, this one, yeah, fine. It will be terrible if it happens, but you'll survive. But don't forget to enjoy it, and, the right people, the right culture, the energy levels are amazing in startups. So don't forget to enjoy it.